I've lived alone most of my adult life. I like silence. I like predictability. And I especially like knowing every creak and groan my apartment makes. After 5 years in the same rent-controlled unit in a quiet part of the city, I thought I knew every inch of it. Every pipe that rattles in the winter, every warped floorboard that pops like a knuckle in the hallway. So when I heard the knock, 3 sharp taps against the wall beside my bed, I knew instantly it wasn't a normal. It wasn't the pipes, it wasn't the neighbors, it was too deliberate. I sat up in the dark, heart pressing against my ribs. My room was still quiet, the kind of quiet that rings in your ears. I turned my head slowly toward the source, the far corner where my dresser sat flush against the wall. I waited, held my breath. Nothing, maybe I imagined it. A dream leaking into the edges of waking. I laid back down, tap, tap, tap. This time slower, heavier, like knuckles dragging across wood, not from the other side of the wall, but from inside it. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, logic had crept back in. Old buildings shift. Mice in the walls. Maybe even a bird had gotten stuck behind the brick. It had happened to my neighbor once. But I couldn't stop staring at that wall. The strange thing was, the apartment didn't make sense architecturally. My unit was at the end of the hallway, the last apartment on the top floor. The wall in question was an exterior wall. On the other side was nothing but alley and air. So what was making the noise? I moved the dresser. It was heavier than I remembered, and there were deep scuff marks in the floor beneath it, as if it had been moved back and forth many times before. Behind it, faded wallpaper, pale blue with vertical stripes, brittle and peeling at the corners. I ran my fingers along the seam where the wall met the floor. Nothing unusual until I pressed on one of the panels just to test it. It gave, not much, but enough. A faint click and then a soft creak. There was a door. Not a real door, not with a handle or a frame. Just a rectangular outline in the wall, barely perceptible beneath the paper. Seamless, silent, wrong. I leaned in, heart drumming in my ears. I pressed again. It moved more this time, revealing a crack of darkness, thin as a thread, and then something moved behind it. I jumped back, nearly tripping over the dresser. My skin turned to ice. I stared at the wall for what felt like hours, but nothing else stirred. By the afternoon, curiosity had burrowed past fear. I needed to know. I went down to the hardware store and bought a pry bar and flashlight. Back upstairs, I began to peel back the wallpaper, hands shaking. The old paste crumbled like ash, revealing an uneven wooden panel nailed to a narrow, hidden frame. Someone had sealed this shut sloppily, hastily, like they wanted it gone fast. I pried the first board loose. Dust poured out in waves. Behind it, darkness. Thick, silent, and absolute. I shined the flashlight inside. It was a narrow corridor, not a full room, not yet, but a passage. The air coming out of it was different, colder, heavier. It smelled faintly metallic and sweet, like rust and rot. My skin crawled, but I kept going. I pulled away the last board and revealed a small doorway, barely shoulder width. That's when I noticed something else, scratches, deep and erratic, on the inside of the wood panels. Not like from tools, like from fingernails. Long, desperate claw marks. I should have called the landlord, or the police, or someone. But I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe it was because I felt like I'd broken something sacred, pulled the thread on a sweater that was never meant to unravel. Or maybe it was the part of me, the dark, curious part, that wanted to know what had been sealed behind my bedroom wall. So I stepped inside. The corridor was barely 3 feet long. I shuffled sideways, dragging the flashlight beam across crumbling plaster and splintered wood. At the end of it, another wall. But this one was different. This one had a door, a real one. Old, rotted at the bottom with rusted hinges and a brass knob caked in grime. It didn't fit the building. Didn't fit any building. It looked hand-carved, the kind of thing you'd find in a cabin 100 years ago, and carved into the center of it in shallow, uneven letters, "Stay out." That's when the smell hit me. Stronger now, coppery, wet, and something else. Something sickly sweet, like decaying fruit. I tried the knob. Locked. But not solid. I could feel it give, just slightly. I knocked, without thinking. 1, 2, 3. Just like the knocks I'd heard the night before. And then, impossibly, I heard footsteps. Not mine, not echoes. Coming from the other side of the door. Slow, deliberate, approaching. Then silence. I backed out, quickly. Crawled backward through the narrow corridor. Dust clinging to my face and hair like ash. I replaced the wood panels. Pulled the dresser back in front of a wall. Sat on my bed and stared. That night, I didn't sleep again. But I didn't hear the knocks either, which was somehow worse. I didn't go near the wall for 3 days. I avoided my bedroom unless absolutely necessary, sleeping on the couch with the TV playing at a low volume all night, not because I was watching it, but because silence had started to feel threatening, like it was listening, but silence wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the knocking stopped. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't. Not even close. The silence felt like something holding its breath, waiting, and the dreams, they were worse than anything. Every night I saw that door again, the one in the hidden corridor, but it wasn't as shut anymore. It was wide open. Something crouched inside, just out of sight, watching me with eyes I couldn't see, but felt. Like weight on my chest. Like cold hands around my throat. Like a hunger that didn't blink. I'd wake up choking on air, drenched in sweat, the smell of iron thick in my nostrils. By the 4th morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I told myself I had to investigate, to prove it was just a weird old storage crawl space, or maybe some forgotten maintenance shaft. Anything normal. I moved the dresser again, peeled back the wooden panels, slower this time. Every creak of the boards felt like a scream in that stillness. And there it was again, the narrow corridor. And at the end, that same door, still shut, still bearing the words, "Stay out." But something had changed. On the inside of the wooden panel ID removed, the one facing the corridor, there were now scratches. Long, jagged gouges in the wood, deep enough to flake splinters. They hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. I ran my fingers over them. They weren't random. They were desperate. Repetitive. As if something had been trying to claw its way out. Or in. My hands were shaking as I traced the marks. That's when I noticed the wallpaper just inside the corridor. The same faded blue stripes, like in my room. But here the stripes were warped, twisted, and beneath the peeling paper, something else was scrawled. Letters. At first, I thought it was graffiti, maybe left by a squatter or a former tenant, but as I rubbed the grime away, words emerged. Faint, scrawled in something dark that had long since dried to a reddish brown. "He won't let me leave." I stumbled back. My flashlight trembled in my hand, casting distorted shadows across the narrow space. Then I saw another message, further down the corridor wall, barely visible through the peeling wallpaper. "'Tis not a room, it's a cage." I got out of there fast. Put everything back, sealed it up, told myself to forget it. Told myself to call the landlord, the police, anyone, but I didn't, because I knew how it would sound. There's a secret door behind my dresser with a cursed message scrawled in blood. Right, they'd laugh, or worse, they'd come. Open it, let it out. No, I just needed to get out for a while. Clear my head. I packed a bag, booked a hotel across town for the weekend. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The lights were flickering, not unusual in old buildings, but all of them in a row were flickering in sequence, like a slow pulse, from one end of the hall to mine. I turned back toward my apartment, and the door was open, wide open. I hadn't left it that way. I went back inside cautiously. The room smelled different, like dust and damp wood, like earth, like something old. I stepped back into my bedroom, and my heart nearly stopped. The dresser was moved. Not completely, just nudged a few inches out, but enough to reveal the edge of the hidden doorway. The wooden panels I'd replaced were gone. In their place, an opening. The corridor yawned dark before me, wider than before. Longer somehow, like it had stretched. And at the end of it, the old door, it was open, just a few inches. Just enough to see blackness beyond. That's when I noticed something on the floor just outside the hidden door. Something small. I crouched down, my hands trembling. It was a tooth, human. Still bloody at the root. I stayed at the hotel that night. No bag, no toothbrush, just keys and fear. Sleep didn't come easy. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was a dream. A hallucination. Carbon monoxide. Mold. Something rational. But even away from the apartment, the dreams followed. Worse this time. I was inside the corridor, crawling, the walls pressing inward, breathing. The door at the end opened on its own, and something stepped out. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could hear it breathing. Could feel its hand brush my shoulder. It leaned close and whispered one word in my ear over and over. Stay. The next day, I went back. I had to. I couldn't leave it like that. I needed answers. But when I entered the apartment, everything was back to normal. Dresser in place, panels sealed. No sign of the corridor at all, except one thing. A faint, almost imperceptible trail of muddy footprints across my floor, leading from the bedroom wall to the foot of my bed. They were bare, small, and facing outward, as if someone or something had been standing there watching me sleep. I didn't tell anyone. I started to once. Dialed my sister's number. She answered on the second ring. Asked if I was okay, said I sounded off. My mouth opened to speak, to pour it all out, but the words got tangled in my throat like fishing wire. Something stopped me. Something inside me whispered, if you tell, it'll get worse. So I lied, said I was tired, hung up, and went back to the wall. It was early morning. Light filtered through the blinds in pale slats, and the apartment was quiet. Too quiet, like the silence wasn't passive anymore, but watching me. I moved the dresser again, more slowly this time. It didn't resist. The wall behind it looked like nothing had been touched. No panels missing. No marks, just old, brittle wallpaper. But I knew better now. I pressed the same panel as before, felt the subtle give. The wooden seams clicked like a lock loosening. A soft creak, like the sigh of someone waking from a long sleep. And this time, I didn't bring a flashlight. I didn't need to. The corridor glowed, not brightly, just enough to show the way, like bioluminescence deep in the ocean. The walls pulsed with a dim, sickly green light, like mold growing beneath wet stone. I stepped in. Each footfall echoed, not from my shoes, but from somewhere below me, like something mimicking my steps just out of sync. The corridor was longer now. Much longer. I turned back once. The opening was still behind me, but the apartment felt far away. Too far. Then I reached the door. It was fully open now, no warnings carved in the wood. No knob, just the threshold of a forgotten place. The air that seeped out was cold and wet, like the inside of a cellar after a flood. I stepped through. It wasn't a room, it was a shrine, and it was waiting for me. The space was round, impossibly so, with curved stone walls that pressed inward like a ribcage. Candles lined the edges, burned down to nubs, their wax congealed in grotesque patterns across the floor, symbols etched in soot and something darker. The air tasted like copper and rot, and at the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of bones, was a chair, wooden, old, worn smooth at the arms. Straps hung from each side, restraints. And in the corner, facing the wall, was a mirror. Not mounted, just leaning. Tall and oval-shaped, the kind with blackened glass that didn't reflect anything quite right. I could see my silhouette in it, but nothing else. No background, no room. Just me, and something behind me. I turned. Nothing there. Looked back at the mirror. It was closer now. I hadn't moved, but it had. I took a step back. My heel struck something soft. I looked down. A mattress, thin and filthy, shoved against the curve of the wall, stained, torn, as if someone had slept on it for years. Above it, scribbled onto the wall in charcoal or dried blood, I couldn't tell, were the same words from the corridor. He won't let me leave, but this time there was more. He sits inside you when you sleep. He eats your shadow first. He tastes with your eyes. Sometimes he's in the mirror. Sometimes he's in the wall. I backed away, stomach turning. Something shifted in the room. A cold wind blew from inside, not outside. The candles flickered violently. The mirror groaned. And then I heard it again, that sound, tap, tap, tap. But not from the wall, from the chair. There was something in it now. A figure, vague, shaped like a man, but wrong, too long, too still. His face was hidden, dipped forward in shadow, hands resting lightly on the arms of the chair. And around his wrists, the straps. I should have run, screamed, done something. But I couldn't move. My feet were nailed to the stone. My breath turned to frost. My heartbeat was so loud I could hear it echo through the room like a drumbeat. Then he lifted his head, just an inch. Enough to show a smile, not warm, not human, too wide, too hungry. I stumbled back toward the corridor, but the opening was gone. In its place, wall, stone sealed shut. Trapped. The man in the chair stood, the straps falling away like dead skin. He turned toward me. His feet didn't move. He slid. And then he was gone. Just vanished. The mirror cracked. Once. Then again. A spiderweb of fractures. And in the glass, I saw myself, but I was still in the chair, smiling. I must have blacked out. When I woke, I was lying on my bedroom floor, gasping, soaked in sweat. Morning light poured through the blinds. The dresser was back in place. The wall was sealed. But the mattress was still in the middle of the floor. No, not the same mattress. A new one, clean, untouched. Waiting. I stood slowly, knees trembling. I looked in the mirror by my closet, hands shaking, trying to convince myself it was all in my head, but my reflection was wrong. It smiled back before I did. I stopped going to work, didn't call, didn't explain. I just couldn't. The apartment had changed, or maybe I had. Either way, the world outside didn't feel real anymore. It felt far away, thin, like cheap theater scenery that would fall if I touched it too hard. And the noises had returned, but they weren't just in the wall now. They were under the floorboards. I would hear them in the middle of the night. A dragging sound, slow, wet, like something crawling through liquid beneath my bed. Sometimes I'd press my ear to the wood, heart pounding, and I'd hear breathing, deep, animalistic, but wrong. Like someone pretending to be human and not getting it quite right. Once I whispered, "Hello," into the floor. It whispered back. Almost time. I began to notice other changes too, little things at first. My reflection would flicker. Objects would be in different places when I returned to the room. Food rotted faster. My phone wouldn't hold a charge. And sometimes when I stood too long in silence, the air around me would shift like someone was circling just out of reach, a cold presence pressing in from all sides. I started keeping every light in the apartment on at all times, but even that didn't help. Shadows still found me, not in corners, but on the ceiling, moving against the light, stretching toward me. That's when I decided to find the basement. I had to know what was under the apartment. The landlord had always been weirdly evasive about the building's layout. Old construction, he'd say. Certain areas are sealed off, unsafe. But I remembered something when I first moved in. The super had mentioned a boiler room in the basement, said not to worry about it, that it was taken care of at 2 The stairwell leading down was dusty, unused, and colder than it should have been. Each step creaked like it hadn't been touched in years. My flashlight, the same one I'd used to explore the hidden corridor, flickered the moment I crossed the threshold. The air down there was damp, foul. It smelled like old meat and mildew. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a narrow hallway lined with rusted pipes and crumbling plaster. The floor was slick beneath my shoes. There were rooms, some sealed, some open, filled with broken furniture, piles of forgotten belongings, and walls covered in claw marks. Deep ones, like something had been trying to dig upward, and then I found the boiler room. The door was cracked open. Inside, the boiler hummed, impossibly new, polished, gleaming. It didn't belong. Nothing in the building did. But what caught my attention wasn't the machinery. It was the trapdoor in the far corner. It was barely noticeable, just a seam in the floorboards beneath a coil of old tubing. I moved the clutter aside, heart pounding in my ears. The trapdoor had no handle, but I pried it open with a rusted screwdriver from a nearby shelf. Below, darkness. Not just absence of light, a pulsing liquid blackness, like the shadows were alive. A ladder led down. I don't know why I descended. I should have run, called the police, burned the whole building down, but something inside me pulled. Like gravity, like hunger, I went down. The air grew colder with each rung, moist. It clung to my skin like oil. When I reached the bottom, my flashlight died completely, and yet I could still see. Dimly, wrongly, like the light wasn't coming from anywhere but was just there. The space I stood in was identical to my bedroom, the same dimensions, the same layout, except everything was reversed, mirror-like. The bed, the dresser, the window, all there but old, decayed, covered in rot and mold. Like someone had built a copy of my room and left it to die. And in the bed, someone was sleeping or pretending to. I crept closer, barely breathing. The figure in the bed was curled under filthy sheets, unmoving. But I could see their skin, pale, bloated, lined with black veins that pulsed slightly beneath the surface. Their hair was the same as mine, same build, same scar on the jaw. It was me, or something that looked like me. Its eyes opened, milky white, filmed over like old cataracts. But beneath the surface, a flicker of red, it opened its mouth. But instead of a voice, a second face pushed through, stretching the skin from behind like cellophane, its own mouth smiling inside mine. It whispered. "I've been watching from underneath, waiting," I screamed. Stumbled back. Climbed the ladder 2 rungs at a time. But the space around me shifted. The ladder didn't go up anymore. It went sideways. The walls bent, warped, turned inside out. Everything became wrong. I must have blacked out again. I woke up back in my bed. But something was different. Everything was dot mirrored. Dresser on the wrong side. Scar on the wrong cheek. Reflections no longer matched. And the knock came again, not from the wall or the floor, but from inside my closet. Tap, tap, tap. Followed by the quiet rustling click of a latch. Coming undone. I didn't run, not this time. I think part of me knew there was nowhere left to run. Whatever this was, whatever had opened that first knock behind the wall, it had already stepped through. It had followed me beneath the floor, into the mirror, and now into me. The closet door creaked open, just a crack. Darkness pulsed behind it, not empty, but waiting. I stood frozen at the edge of my bed, watching as the door slowly, deliberately widened, revealing nothing inside at first. Just coats, boxes, then movement, not fast, not sudden. Long fingers, too many knuckles, nails black with rot. A pale hand slid from the shadows, gripping the edge of the door. And then a face emerged, mine, but not. It smiled, the same smile from the mirror, wide and knowing. The other me. Its skin was tight, stretched like wax over bone, lips colorless. Eyes black around the edges, sunk deep and gleaming like oil. It stepped out, and I didn't move. Because this wasn't an invasion, it was a homecoming, preparing. The apartment groaned. Not the walls or the floorboards, the air itself. Like the whole building was taking a breath. The other me, the thing that wore my face, walked forward, barefoot, silent. Every step it took echoed, not in sound, but in memory. Like I could feel where it had been, like I had been there too. I backed away, inch by inch, until my legs hit the dresser. Nowhere else to go. The thing stopped in front of me and tilted its head. Not curiously, lovingly. Then it reached up, slowly, and touched my face, damp. But beneath the horror, there was a strange familiarity, a closeness. Its fingers were cold. Then it leaned in and whispered, in my own voice, "You were never alone here. You're just remembering." Suddenly, everything shifted. Like a film reel burning in reverse. I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. I was in the room behind the wall, but fully now. It had grown, evolved. No longer a hidden crawl space. It was a cathedral of shadow. Walls lined with faces, mine, all versions, all watching. Recreated, room by room, smell by smell. I remembered the door behind the dresser. The hidden space I was told never to enter. The candles had returned, tall and flickering, casting long black shapes across the stone floor. And in the center, the chair waited again, straps unbuckled, seat open, welcoming. And I remembered the first time I heard the knock. Not last week, not even last year, but when I was a child. This wasn't my first apartment, this was my old one. And the day I did, I remembered the voice calling me, "Come play." Just for a minute, I remember crawling inside, the door swinging shut, the darkness swallowing me, and then nothing, blankness. Like someone had pressed pause on my life. Like I had been replaced, and now the cycle was returning. The creature, the other me, stepped aside, gestured toward the chair, and behind me I felt others, many, footsteps. Whispers, all of them versions of me. Slight differences, height, age, injury, all plucked from a million alternate choices. All prisoners, all watching. And they began to speak, together, a chorus of breath. He lives in the in-between. Behind walls, beneath floors, inside mirrors. He wears your choices like skin. And now, he's almost finished. The original me, the one who stepped out of the closet, smiled again. He held out a hand. "Your turn." I didn't sit in the chair. I couldn't. The walls writhed. Faces screamed silently from the plaster. Instead, I ran. Back through the corridor, which twisted, bent, folded in on itself like flesh being turned inside out. I reached the threshold, found my way back into the apartment. Or something like it. But everything was wrong. The layout was mirrored, backward. The furniture decayed, covered in dust. Outside the windows, blackness. Like the world had been erased. And on every wall, floor to ceiling, were scratches. Messages, claw marks, fingernail trails, blood. I spun in place, panicked, looked at my hands. They weren't mine anymore. The skin was pale, veined, the fingers too long, the nails black. The mirror across the room cracked. Not from the frame, from within, it shattered. And in the pieces, I didn't see a reflection. I saw a room, my real apartment, still bright, still untouched, still safe, and in it me, the version of me that got out. The version that left me behind. I screamed, slamming my fists against the mirror, begging, crying, trying to tear through the glass. And on the other side, safe me walked to the mirror, calm, collected. He looked at me and smiled. Then slowly, gently, turned the mirror to face the wall, leaving me in the dark, alone, behind the final wall. They say some buildings creak with age, with wind, with settling, but sometimes they creak because something inside is still alive, still waiting, still knocking, tap, tap. And when you finally move the dresser, when you finally open that door, just remember, the room is never empty. It's just waiting for you to return.